welcome to Grey Muzzle Geekery for the week of January 27th, 2020, episode 38. I'm Dusty Red, and with me as always,
I'm Dusty White.
And let's get into this week's news. Having first aired on August 22nd, 2014, The Adventures of the Walking Narcissistic Existential Crisis were dropped onto Netflix, with the first half of the final season, Season 6, having been released on October 25th, 2019. The second half of the final season of Bojack Horseman will finally be released on Friday, January 31st. I can't frickin' wait.
I mean, as far as Bojack Horseman goes, it happened to hit me in my life in a very weird point.
I think you and me both in that regard. Come to think of it. You and I both had altering life decisions that kind of happened while the show was airing, and I know I could speak for a couple particular instances that really altered my
view on life.
I would say view on life, just altered the timeline itself, and kind of went like, oh shit, that's relatable. All right, well, I guess.
I mean, to be fair, the whole season is very relatable for anybody that's felt like they kind of stumbled through life and it wasn't a storybook happy ever after ending. And I think that's kind of where it was going for a majority of this genre or this millennial grouping of people.
Yeah, to a degree. I mean, using millennials a little off because you still have the issue of just a lot of people in general that are just going through points in their life. Like, I guess Bojack's not a millennial. I guess he'd be... Well, he's not boomer, though. I don't think he's that...
I don't know. Well, he is whatever Bob Saget would think he is, because it's essentially who his character is.
Is Bob Saget?
Yeah. I mean, have you never made that correlation?
No, I wouldn't see him as Bob Saget, I guess. I mean, I get that as in terms of age-wise, sure, but I wouldn't. The personalities are definitely different. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, it is a case of just I don't know, man. It's definitely one of my favorite shows. I'm sure we'll end up doing a recap in the near future on just our take on
all of the absurdities of it.
Well, especially how it starts off in season 1 of just very absurd and very like, okay, talking animal people, whatever.
Well, I don't even think the season 1 is absurd. I think it's just more world building. Like, I know we've talked about that in a couple of different seasons of shows that or even books, that the first season is just world building and you getting to know the characters, and then whatever escalates past that point is whatever you've involved yourself into time or energy-wise to enjoy the series. Again, I kind of got a different scenario than you did of you kind of were watching all the way through. I binge watched it and kind of just correlated my life to it, whereas you may not have done the same thing.
No, I seen it on basically when it came out. I think when I first caught it, there was already 2 seasons out. And then I binged those. And then as new seasons were coming out, like, actually watched them in time. So
I feel like that's almost a session or segment in its own of how people used to watch shows versus what they watch now. Because does BoJack exist in the world when you can't binge watch something like that? Where you have to watch something that is almost that personality and world destroying as BoJack.
Easily.
In episode by episode, week by week. Or you just kind of binge watch it and be like, well, I've sunken this much into it. Let's see where it goes from here.
No, I think it's totally watchable. I think all the shows, though, are watchable. I think it's just the shortened attention span and the need to want to binge everything that has kind of changed. For BoJack in particular, I think the hardest part would be getting it on a network. Like, it's good for a Comedy Central late night. It wouldn't work on Fox. It wouldn't work on NBC.
Oh, I could totally see MTV and the old school, the like Tick and
no, it wasn't Tick.
Eon Flux.
Wasn't Tick.
What was it?
The Max.
Oh, was it the Max?
Oh, do not question me on that.
So that kind of
No, because
MTV programming.
But those are still too out there and too
almost
weird.
like Duckman?
I think Duckman was USA. That would be closer to the style. A late night USA, maybe an FX type channel would have a show like Bojack. I can't see it on Fox. I can't see it on NBC or ABC. Even if you cleaned up swear words or anything else, it's just not the absurdity, but there's a level of depth with it that they wouldn't allow on.
I mean, they hit on some pretty heavy topics.
And for those who haven't seen Bojack, don't let the cartoon / talking animal people distract you. One of our listeners, Bada, in fact, best summed it up of, they do a very good job on distracting you with hey, look, talking animal people. And then they just kick you in the groin with some sort of deep emotional or psychological bit that makes you stop and reflect or think or just relate it to somebody you know. And then they make a fart joke at the end. They'd be like, haha, talking animal people. And you're... And then roll credits.
You're left sitting going, what the did I just watch? And why did it make me feel XYZ?
And that's kind of what they do. So, like I said, I'm personally jacked about Bojack. And we'll probably spend this particular weekend locked up and watching it. So,
local Brookfield, Illinois legend Doc Mack has been inducted into the International Video Game Hall of Fame. On January 16th, 2020, the International Video Game Hall of Fame presented the owner of The Galloping Ghost with its Community Action Award at the 66 Game Esports Tournament in downstate Illinois, Bloomington. Apparently, Ottumwa, Attumwa, Iowa, has been deemed the unlikely but long accepted video game capital of the world. Doc Mack has been an international arcade evangelist who, by his own account, helped open 32 arcades worldwide. Mack is also a voracious collector and savior of some really rare video game specimens. Video game designer Chris Tang goes on to give credit to Doc Mack and Galloping Ghost for saving and making available to the public Primal Rage 2, which Tang had designed for Atari in 1990 and was crushed when it was canceled and almost lost to posterity. In 2004, Mack announced he had acquired it and was putting Primal Rage 2 as a prototype on the Galloping Ghost video arcade floor. Galloping Ghost Arcade, 9415 Ogden Avenue in Brookfield, Illinois, which celebrates a decade in business, now boasts more than 750 games, not counting the 40 vintage, rare, and classic pinball games at the Galloping Ghost Pinball Arcade just right down the street. I know this is a location I keep wanting to visit, and there's been a couple of my friends that have gone. Thoughts?
I mean, congratulations, first and foremost. I mean, I'm down to go and make for a good episode and get some good photos and stuff. It's something I've only recently kind of started hitting some of the barcades and whatnot, and it's cool to see the resurgence, so to speak, of a lot of these. And although they're 10 years established, It's good to see a lot of these places kind of refurbing and cleaning up old arcades and kind of bringing that back. It seemed like with the console games that kind of... Because I remember a time when, Mortal Kombat and the Simpsons arcade...
Killer Instinct.
And all these games were specifically for arcade because a lot of home consoles couldn't...
handle the graphics.
And couldn't produce these games of these quality. Well, all of a sudden, home consoles have just basically destroyed the arcade industry by making games that are... just better looking and better in just about every way, more accessible. And now they kind of took a step back and went, yeah, but people miss the simplicity of this. People miss the socializing that comes with these games, rather than listen to some 14-year-old call you an N-word or a B-word or a P-word or just
jerks.
Or just being rude. Now you get to go in a more adult setting, sit down, or go settle up to an arcade, have a drink, talk with some other people. I mean, we did something similar to that last year in March, where we went to an arcade and they had a Game of Thrones theme going on. And just had a variety of games there for us to play. Old pinball games, arcade games, and whatnot. And obviously, alcohol was served, which is, makes any old game better. So, yeah, I mean, it's pretty awesome. And we definitely gotta hit up Galloping Ghost before too soon.
Right. I totally agree.
Founded in 2018, Runic Games has made its mark in the gaming world by bringing us titles Torchlight and Torchlight 2, which were, Diablo-style RPG action games that had a bit more of a cartoony flair to them. I personally spent many an hour roaming around the town of Torchlight and subsequently watching the fall before, hunting down the alchemist in Torchlight 2, which was released in 2012. Well, with Runic Games going defunct in 2017, Max Schaefer, executive producer and creator of the Torchlight series, started a new company called Ectra, which announced their plans to make a free-to-play action RPG in August of 2018. They planned on calling that game Torchlight Frontiers, which was to follow up the Torchlight franchise. However, on January 27th, 2020, Mr. Schaefer announced that they're going to rebrand that free-to-play project into a full-blown spiritual successor officially titled Torchlight 3. The company has shifted away from the free-to-play model and are going to release it on Steam later this year as a premium model, where basically you pay for the game and receive all the content rather than a free-to-play style, which will have you earn fake crediting coins or whatever. So they're going to release it as a straight-up normal game. Any thoughts on that? Have you played any of the Torchlight series?
I haven't, but I think I watched some of the Felicia Day and her brother play the Torchlight series the last couple of weeks when we ended up at a bar, which was ironic enough for it to be
on a bar.
On a TV at a bar itself, but kind of speaks to more e-games in general. But it seemed like a game that I could probably, as somebody who's not a gamer, kind of get into, just because it seemed a little bit more simpler than WoW or Diablo itself.
Mm-hmm.
And had a little bit more easy playability to it. But yeah, I could totally get into something that's got three individual type games to it. And
it's important to note, too, for those that don't know, that Max Schaefer worked at Blizzard for the release of Diablo 2, and Diablo 2 Lord of Destruction. So he's coming into this with the knowledge and the experience of, I mean, there's 2 titles, but 3, 2 titles and an expansion that
and
were
pretty epic in expansions to begin with themselves.
It's the games were huge. Like, it's one of the reasons why the Blood Sugar Sex Magic album by Red Hot Chili Peppers is forever ingrained in my head. Because we have to go do, the big treasure run was Mephisto. You do Mephisto runs, and I would have that album playing, and I would just do these runs and play the game and grind, because it got grindy. I mean, you farm for items and whatnot. I mean, Torchlight will have that grind feel to it, too. Not as bad, though. You didn't have to, specifically hunt one area. You got to move around a little bit more. But yeah, those are the concepts and the ideas. So Max Schaefer, who knows what he's doing, he works around many people with talent. And so when he made his new studio, the Ectra Games, in an interview, he talked about bringing people from Runic, bringing a couple people from Blizzard, some old friends, and they moved to the studio in the Bay Area in California. So he's got kind of the old crew back together and is now working on, well, they were working on Torchlight Foundations, but they realized through alpha gaming and a lot of feedback that
this is big enough to be on its own.
It's good enough to be on its own, and with just some tweaking, they could just sell it as a normal game rather than try to play that free-to-play
downloadable content.
Purchase stuff.
It and get all of it.
Yeah, they're like, here, you know what? Here's your, and it'll probably be $20-25 or something. They're not terribly expensive games. And I've personally put a couple 100 hours into it, so it was worth my money.
Fair. So, check out our first live show and in person at Brookfield, Wisconsin at the FurSquared convention, where your 2 gray muzzles will have a special guest and offer our typical gray muzzle humor. February 13th through 14th, again in Brookfield, Wisconsin.
Happy Valentine's Day! Or something like that.
I mean, should we mention that Happy Valentine's Day coincides with our year anniversary for Grey Muzzle?
We'll be a year old, and we'll be live during our birthday celebration.
Right?
Ooh, cupcakes. I like cupcakes.
I have to bake cupcakes?
Oh, you have to make pie.
No.
Pie over cupcakes.
Boo.
Pie. Or pie over cake, period.
Cake over pie. How dare you?
Oh, here we go. Twitter poll. Pie over cake. Pie over cake. So yeah, I mean, go and come see us in Brookfield, Wisconsin. We'll be live on Saturday at 4 o'clock doing Grey Muzzle Geekery podcast. However, if you happen to be at the convention itself for any length of time, we will be doing Otherworldly Stories, which is our
basically our gaming or LARPing con show.
Conversation stuff. It's a panel where we talk about LARP stuff and just the entertaining aspect of it. And it's a lot less jargon and a lot less, I rolled a 20 and I critted with my THAC0 and blah, 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 blah. No, it's more relatable stories in terms of just things that happen and things that kind of pull you into the game or pull you out or whatnot. So it's a fun storytelling panel, more or less making fun of a number of us on stage. And then I guess I'm doing charity D&D for the puppies and kitties.
Yay, puppies and kitties.
Obviously, FurSquared is a non-profit convention. And so their charity is Humane Animal Welfare Society of Milwaukee, or Greater Milwaukee, I think it is. Greater Milwaukee land area.
It's Haas.
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 Well, Haas. But it stops at HAWS, so Humane Animal Welfare Society. But it's of
Milwaukee.
Basically, it's a greater Chicagoland area. Because we all know Chicago goes all the way up to Green Bay.
Listen, stop amoebaing of everything else.
Nailed it. Amoeba. I mean, we don't want Gary, so we're good there. We kind of make like a little arch around Gary or make our way towards Kalamazoo. And then we don't go south of 80. We already know that. But, so we'll be doing that and, making fools of ourselves with our lovely DM, Phelan. And then on Saturday evening, we'll be doing the Grey Muzzle Geekery podcast, and we'll be opening up for the Dragget Show. And if you haven't seen them, go look them up, dragetshow.com. You can look on YouTube and a variety of, just do a goggle search. A jujule. A
jujule?
A jujule search.
A big mouth jujule?
I do a jujule shirt. Jujule at. And you'll find them out. They're definitely silly and a little bit more, what's the word I want to use?
Eyebrows.
Explicit. Eyebrows. And, we'll be opening up for them and be hanging around the convention. So if you're there, just look for myself or Dusty White and, hey, have a drink with us.
But come talk to us, come join us, come enjoy in the shenanigery of
hashtag shenanigery
of Grey Muzzle.
And with that, we'll end this week's news. And so we're going to introduce a new segment to the show. We kind of talked about it a little bit, and as we like to do and keep the segments rolling, we're going to do this segment, which is going to be our interviews. Our interview segment, which we call Fox Noises. Fox Noises.
Fox Noises.
Fox Noises.
Fox Noises.
Fox Noises.
So, introduction to our segment, Fox Noises. Today we have a special guest, John. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, I'm John Basset. I'm the director at TwinMask.
To give our listeners some background as to why we were chatting with you today, John is the director of TwinMask LARP out of Corona, California. And spoilers, but his LARP was featured on an episode of The World According to Jeff Goldblum. It was kind of just a gaming episode in general, but we wanted to give a platform for another type of LARP to discuss things. So where and when did the spark for TwinMasks come from?
I'd say about 10 years ago. Around that time, I moved to LA from the East Coast, and I Basically, I was looking for a game. The style of LARP out here was very different than what I was used to. And since I couldn't find a game quite like what I was looking for, I decided to make it, and I thought that I could bring something unique to the region that they hadn't seen before. And, a lot of work, blood, sweat, and tears. And, then we eventually got going.
I find that pretty interesting, too, you see that a lot with accents, with people talking. You'll see that with a lot of LARPs in terms of regionality. You'll see games in the East, games in the Midwest, games in the Southeast, games in the Southwest, games in the West have very different, even if it's the same game, have very different styles. Do you have any perspective on that real quick?
Yeah, I mean, some of them have to do with origin. There's nothing wrong with the games out here, or at least the games that were here prior to when I showed up, but a lot of them, they were created from Mind's Eye Theater players. So that's the Vampire LARPs. Mm-hmm. Okay. So a lot of them were coming from a background where they wanted more action, more than rock, paper, scissors to dispute what was going on. For anyone who's not aware, in the Mind's Eye Theater system, or in most Vampire LARPs, they're more parlor LARP style, which means that they're more relying on the role play aspect, and anything that has physicality, they have a no contact rule, so they arbitrate any of that with literally a game of rock, paper, scissors. And so anyway, they were looking for more activity than that, but didn't necessarily want it to be a heavy combat game or anything like that. Okay. So combat was never a big part of the game, even though it existed. And also, there's a very, very heavy PvP aspect in a lot of vampire games. There aren't multiple lives. You die and that's it. You make a new character. And that can create real bad griefing systems that are in place. So also, just the concept of PvP was looked on very differently. Everyone had to consent for any sort of in-character violence, which I always thought was odd. Not that I ever wanted a full PvP game, but if you're playing a berserker and a little annoying gnome comes up and steals your sword or something, you have every right to go crazy and put him into bleed out or something. You shouldn't need permission to have to role play the way that your character should role play, as long as you're not bullying or not being,
definitely agree.
Yeah, that becomes a thin line to worry about too, because there's points where you have to police you have to do your regulation and policing in game, dealing with stuff, but at the same time it does dance that razor thin line of okay, I'm not trying to grief you, but you gotta learn your lesson by now.
Yeah, you actively did something that clearly my character's gonna rage about. So how long, and you talked about blood, sweat, tears to get it done, but roughly how long did it take you from thought to fully formed gameplay?
So for our game, it took about a year. We would meet pretty regularly. My team would meet at least once a week. I drive up to where a lot of my original staff team would meet. And that was a lot of it too, trying to assemble a team that was passionate about it. And that was tricky for me because I was newer to the LARP community. So I didn't have a big reputation or, a lot of even friends that I knew out here. Right. So it was trying to assemble a team of people who were into the project and then also create a rule system and, development and this and that. So yeah, it took us about a year. And even when we first launched, there were so many things where I was I should have taken longer about this.
Everything's always beta for a little bit, for sure.
Yeah.
Both White and I have actually run for Nero International for some time, and actually coming up in September, her and I are actually going to be guest plot for Alliance in Michigan. So we understand the behind the scenes and the things that get overlooked in terms of trying to be a director or run a game or a storyteller or even just a dungeon master in tabletop. There's a lot of little mistakes that happen that you look back and hindsight's 20/20 for an obvious reason, where you look and go, oh, I shouldn't have done that.
Or I should have thought of that.
And one thing that I think was unique to my situation is I had never even staffed for any other LARP.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. I had played lots of games, but, it was to a certain degree one of those yeah, I could do that. How hard could it be? And then you...
Famous last words.
So, but I kind of enjoy that perspective because I've even heard some of our friends talk about their plot teams of you sometimes need that new plot person perspective to go, I at least have found as a player, some of those new vamped, less jaded mods kind of make me a less jaded player as well.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Honestly, I'm not even convinced TwinMask would have been made if I was a jaded veteran, old school.
Oh, you would have
staff
probably
member.
have quit halfway through.
Yeah.
So give me some more background on yourself here, John. How long have you been a gamer LARPer? You said you had kind of come from the East Coast. I know from your siblings that your family's kind of always been into it, but what's your background?
Well, as far as a gamer, like as early as I can remember, my older sister, I'm the youngest. So when she started getting into like D&D and stuff, she would like run little encounters for myself and my brother, and like we got hooked immediately. And that's back when I lived in Illinois. So that was at least like, that was before third grade, you know?
Fair.
And then we moved to Massachusetts. There was this gaming store that we all frequented, and it was like, you know, I was there day in, day out. I used to like walk there after school and like do my homework at this gaming store. And I would like, you know, play all these RPGs with random people. And at least in that specific store, LARPers were kind of almost like looked up to. Like they would come back with all these like really cool stories of like, you know, of whatever they did that weekend. And they were also like, on the whole, they tended to be the more charismatic or more athletic people at that store.
Okay.
And so, you know, I was kind of like, yeah, when I grow up, I'm going to be a LARPer, you know? And I get that's, you know, that's like a weird perspective, I guess, for most people. And then about the time that I was old enough to play, technically, I think I started when I was like 1 year too young. I was 15, and I think they had a 16 age minimum. And so I moved to, well, actually, that's not quite true. My sister brought me to like a single session of her game once or twice. But my first game that I consider like my active game, like my first real PC, that was my freshman year of high school.
Okay.
I go there, and my first character was Herman Gnome, the Gnome of Gnome, who wasn't a gnome. He was a half-elf raised by dwarves who thought he was a gnome.
All right. Okay.
And he was really silly, really awkward. And, you know, that was like a time in my life where I was really silly, really awkward. It was a really good outlet for me to just sort of like channel those emotions.
We've actually kind of talked about that before, for sure.
So that was in a game in Laurel, Maryland called Cambrian Adventures. I don't believe that they exist anymore. But they were based on a European game called Hero Quest, which I think was very similar to IFGS back in the day. And I mean, that'll mean some stuff to some of your listeners.
Absolutely. To kind of get some more introduction to yourself and obviously your game, do you see TwinMask staying a singular game, or do you ultimately want to franchise it or make it a national game?
So that's one very, very tricky thing. Something that I love about our game, I really, really love it, is that we have very high standards for just about every aspect of the game. Like our costuming is very high, our level of like crafting and role play, even the story team and lore. Like there are dedicated bookshelves that are filled with nothing but in-character texts that PCs bring to every game. And so, like, we've written those texts. So I'm talking about, like, oh, here's another 30-page book for you, you know? And all that lore is very great in many ways, but it's also very tricky in other ways, especially in terms of expanding, because maintaining that quality control is very difficult for expansion.
With a boutique, you're able to, I mean, call it for what it is. You're able to control what goes out. what is said, what people look like. There's a level of control you have to relinquish if you go into even not even a national game, even if you open a secondary location by another plot, there's a level of trust that they're going to adhere to those standards, for sure.
So I would need to, I am open to the idea of creating new chapters. However, I would need to trust the capability of that person and make sure that we have like a shared vision. It would be a big step. Mm-hmm. So I'm not necessarily going after that aspect. I'm perfectly happy if we're just a single chapter forever, but I haven't ruled it out by any means.
Okay. And kind of piggying back off of that big step, obviously we would be amiss if we didn't talk about it. What were some of the hoops you did have to jump through for the Jeff Goldblum meeting and the filming? Was that something that you as a chapter tried for? Was it something that fell in your lap? What was the process from that?
So they basically reached out to a bunch of different LARPs in the area, and we responded to them. We started a dialogue. They liked what they saw out of our game. And so they chose our game to visit. And I mean, in terms of the hoops, I would say it's nothing too abnormal for anything in the film industry. Like they still
fair.
They still have to procure like site releases, permission from us to be there. We had like a dedicated meeting where we drove out to site with their production crew, and we kind of talked about, the flow of events and, just how they saw things going. They intentionally kept all of that information from Jeff because they wanted to keep his perspective fresh. But they wanted to make sure their camera crew and, everyone else kind of had a rough idea of what was going on.
So this is just a kind of straight up simple question. Would you do it again?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It definitely created a lot of stress at the game. Like running an event is already stressful, and you only saw like 10 minutes of it, but they were there for most of the day. And there was one moment where we're sort of trying to explain what LARP is, which, took a much longer time than I was expecting. And, we're like getting them into costume and this and that. And when you run mods, you get a sense for when you have to send out the plot lead. Because, so it takes a while to like set up your NPC pool and get them garbed and get them statted and this and that. And what I tend to do is about a half hour, give or take, I will send the plot lead out before the NPCs are 100% finalized, because then, it takes about a half hour for the plot lead to talk to the PCs get assembled, them to come
the PCs to herd themselves.
The PCs assembled is always the, like, you could be ready immediately. PCs assembling is the 1 hour wait.
Yeah, PCs themselves have their own timing structure.
So, you try to balance it such that the NPCs are ready before, but not a long time before the players are ready.
Absolutely.
Then the players show up and you get going. Well, and I should have known better because I've worked in the film industry, but so I send out the NPCs to go wrangle the PCs, and we're about to like get him into the final pieces of garb and stuff, and he's going to be talking for a little bit. But I'm estimating in about a half hour, he'll be good to go, right?
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Then the SAG union mandatory 1 hour lunch break kicks in.
Oh, no.
And you can't prepare for that.
Well, I mean, yes, the film crew didn't give me like a heads up or anything like that. I'm in like when you're running a LARP, you don't even think of food. You're not thinking of mealtime. You're like, okay, what's the next mod? What's the next thing? And you're just like, you get in this groove. And so, and also since they were here for a while, we have NPC shifts. So like every player will take turn NPCing. Well, the people that were on their shift got off their shift, went back, told whisper, they were excited. So they whispered all the players, and then they hear the plot leads getting people. And so everyone gets assembled. I had probably it was supposed to be just the guard, like the town guard escorting them, right? So I was expecting like 20 people.
Okay.
And it was about 150 people showed up.
Wow.
Showed up and then are now waiting for an hour.
We noticed that in the episode too, that when they're going through with the filming of like those gathered, you had a mob, like a flat out mob to protect Goldblum's character, and you could, and again, maybe it's just White and I's perception and being LARPers. We immediately looked at each other and went, "Oh my god, that would be a headache."
You never group your PCs that close together. It's never a good idea.
Well, okay, so there were good and bad aspects of that, right?
Okay.
So, first off, I felt really self-conscious and bad for my players because they had to wait for so long. There was literally nothing that I could do because that was like union mandated. Yeah, so anyway, so already I have players who have been waiting for an hour and they're all impatient. And it's not just that hour, but now we have to get him back into costume, like get him back to the stage that he was at before. And we still have to do that half hour that I had prepped. So it's more like an hour and a half that they're all waiting. And so when we put him in there, we intentionally gave him an NPC that we could, part of my out of character process was I was going to use the in-character guard to create a bubble around him, where like any PC that got too close who wasn't supposed to be there, who wasn't part of the town guard, I wanted our PCs to like beat him up and make sure that he had his personal space.
Sure.
That did not happen.
You mean LARPing didn't go as planned? No.
It did not, no. So, in some ways it read better on TV because everyone's so packed in, you got a sense of like, wow, there are a lot of people here.
Uh-huh.
But also, even from an in-character perspective, we had a whole bunch of assassin NPCs that were supposed to try to get close and attack him. And I wanted the player guard and whoever else to feel cool at like stopping these attempts, right?
Sure, of course.
But by there being so many people like within like an inch, like feet of him, right?
Uh-huh.
You had no idea who was supposed to be there and who wasn't. So the in-character assassins could get right behind him and like attack and this and that. And it was a mess because if it was like a line fight, there's no way you could get an army to him because you have that mob.
Oh,
but like it was easy to sneak assassins in, which again kind of made for good TV because like a lot of the attempts got cut, but there were like 3 or 4 times where it was just like, yep, another time,
We saw as well where like there's a couple points where Jeff looked and he's like, "Did I get hit? I don't know." You're like, "No, you're fine." It's like, "Oh, a scratch. Careful!" Like you can see like where they got close. They got
exactly.
in on him.
He did get hit a few times, but there were players who immediately healed him. And rather than trying to explain, like, yes, you took damage, but then you got healed, I was not even in a good mental state by the time, a lot of the bulk was there. Because I was, like, stressing over the 150 people. Like, things were not going to plan. I was just trying to get there. My producer mind was going.
Oh,
I'd also been, like, kind of fussed at by a few people up until that point because, like, let's face it, a lot of, the players and staff wanted, like, Jeff Goldblum time,
Mm-hmm. Of course.
And so there were a lot of hurt feelings if, like, people didn't have those opportunities. And that was pretty universal. Numerous members of my staff team, especially people who had worked hard, like, they all had legitimate reasons to want to be involved. But the film crew like had a vision in mind and sort of a flow of events. And again, I kind of get it because I've worked in the film industry, but a lot of people haven't, so
they get an assumption of what to happen and what they like,
right.
That, he's in our world, we get to play our world to him, where it's kind of this weird amalgamation. One of our Patreon listeners wrote in with this question, and Bada asks, was there anything the episode glossed over, which you kind of already mentioned, or misrepresentative about your game, and anything you wish they had spent more time on? I was very thankful for the production crew that we got. A lot of times, filmmakers can be very disrespectful to our hobby. Uh-huh.
And the crew that they sent was a National Geographic crew, and they were based out of the United Kingdom. And they were very, very respectful the entire time, tried to be as transparent about everything as possible. And so the editing was a little bit out of context, but I think they did a very good job trying to tell as complete a narrative and as truthful a narrative as they could. So, for example, the assassination attempts didn't happen until after he had given his speech at the theater.
Okay, that makes sense.
So the flow of events was actually, we take him, we get the guard to show up, they escort him to the stage, we provide an opportunity for him to give a speech if he wanted to, and by the way, he got our entire player base to sing songs. I
want to see those bloopers.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have any of that footage, but yeah, it was funny. Not only because we didn't want to assume that he'd give a speech because I don't know what his comfort level is, you know? So our NPC, basically a general was returning from a war, and this was a prominent noble that was with him at a time. So the general gave a speech, and then Lord Darius, which was who Jeff Goldblum was playing, we gave an opportunity for him to talk, but yeah, not only did he take that opportunity, but he rolled with it, and people were singing, it was very entertaining, and just props to anyone thrown in that situation. I don't care how veteran of a LARPer you are, but if I bring you to a stage and are like, hey, do you want to make a speech? And you were to go into all the it was just, he gave an epic speech and it was very entertaining. He did such a good job.
I mean, in his defense, he is a jazz singer and a professional thespian, so it counts. But I mean, some of the games that we played, we have bardic contests for feasts and stuff, and it's always inspiring, really, is the way I'd put it, to see people who are computer programmers or IT people or just quieter type people and mousy type people stand on a table and just start singing and being that's one of the great things about LARPing.
Yeah.
You can just do it.
Oh, you step outside of yourself, and it almost transgresses that person itself you're watching, and especially if you know somebody for a long time, you look at them and you're like, that's not Steve anymore. That is Sir Stefan the Bard singing his little heart out, and it's really cool to see even a veteran, as you said, like Goldblum himself, to just go and get the crowd going and to get everybody
and get into it
is kind of, again, reassuring, because we kind of spoke a little off air of we got picked on for this stuff growing up, and to see someone like Goldblum, who is kind of a weird celebrity.
He's definitely off the beaten path as celebrity goes.
He's definitely got his earlier stuff, and then Jurassic Park, and then kind of a quiet period, and then he reemerges in Thor Ragnarok.
Yep.
So you get that younger crowd that gravitates towards crazy Uncle Jeff.
Yeah.
And to have that bravado and to sing and to be out there is in many ways really beneficial to us as LARPers and to the game itself, to be like, hey, this guy's having a good time, why can't we?
When I was talking to him, I also tried to use certain buzzwords that I knew would resonate with him more than
very smart,
average.
Very smart. Yep.
So, for example, I tried to compare it to theater wherever possible, because it is. LARPing is theater, And there's a very different view between LARP, which is supposedly this super nerdy thing, which I've never understood with how athletic it is.
For sure.
But and theater, which is almost upper class, oh, you're so cultured, you know all the words to Les Mis' songs,
right.
And yeah, when he first showed up, he did a lot of things which made me very nervous. He was like, "Oh, what is this weird land of Larpoptia?" I was like, "Oh God, this is everything that I was hoping it wouldn't be." And then as soon as he got up to us, I was like, "You're backstage. You don't need to be talking like this. You don't." This is a production,
Not to mention that, and that was actually aired too. It makes sense because you're like, oh yeah, consider this backstage. I didn't put two and two together.
But that makes sense. Yeah, absolutely.
Using theater jargon to kind of catch his attention. that
Get
was
them
really
up
clever.
to speed without having to spend a bunch of time understanding, okay, this is NPC monster camp. You don't have to do this here. It's using those terms for, I mean, and that theory is a layman at that point, as somebody who just suddenly shows up and's like, hey, we're doing this production thing and you're going to go LARP, Jeff. And he's like, what the heck is that? So I totally understand using that catch up phrase very quickly to get people understanding without having to go into too much jargon.
Right, but if you were to go up to him and rather than say, hey, you're going to role play with these people, if you're going to say, oh, you're going to go act with these people, he's instantly going to get it.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, clever, man. Real clever.
Did you see an influx? Obviously, it's a little too early now because it's just aired within the last couple of months. Did you see an influx of players after the popularity of something like Game of Thrones getting, aired? Do you see yourself getting an influx of players from this episode later?
Short answer is no. But I never did it for recruitment purposes.
Okay.
Right? So most of the people watching this episode or like if you watch this on Disney Plus, like you're probably not living in California, and even if my game looks amazing, it's probably going to encourage you to check out your local LARP rather than buy a plane ticket and fly out every month,
We've considered showing up to this. Don't worry.
Your standards are super great. Like even just seeing some of your guys' YouTube episodes and things like that. We pride ourselves as veteran LARPers ourselves on making sure our standards are up there. And just to see that many players in a location and playing with that much drive to be that level of standard is very inspiring, very inspiring.
Yeah, thank you. And most of our players also have never LARPed before. So I kind of view it as like passing it forward for the next generation, because LARPing helped my life so much. Like I can't stress that enough. And so it's very gratifying for me to see the same benefits that LARP gave me happening and benefiting younger people or anyone really. Like it,
that resonates so hard with me especially, and I know Red is on the same level. My life would be 110% different if I had not stumbled onto LARPing.
And I started LARPing right after high school, and like the group to this day that I run with is all LARPers and veteran LARPers, and just so you are definitely preaching to the choir and to many of our audience too, who says that they've met either significant others or lifelong friends. I mean, we have some of our friends tattooed their group symbol into their arm and their emblems on their body. So like these are lifelong friendships and bonds that that came from LARPing. And so that's why we're very eager as soon as somebody wants to poke fun at LARP, like look at the good that's come from it.
And even therapists have started to notice the benefits of LARP. One of my friends sees like a psychologist, and they were like, what's that acting thing that you do? And then they started recommending it to some of their clients and stuff like that. And it's just a way that you can kind of like face certain phobias or fears or insecurities in a safe environment.
It's funny you mentioned that, because we have my therapist is going to hopefully become one of our other Fox Noises interviews.
Oh, nice.
Because she's very much a fan of just what LARPing operates as a safe space for escapism, and it's great.
I mean, even if you don't want to, escapism, I think, is sometimes a misleading term with. I don't go to LARP really to escape so much, but I love so many aspects of it. And when I was a insecure little middle school, freshman, high school sort of person, right? But then, you're in game and you start to like become higher level. And now people like people you look up to are like, oh, can you go with us on this mod? You're like, oh, you want me? And now I feel more confident, and, you can be a badass in game and whatever, and you take that confidence into the real world with you. Absolutely. You're like, I do have value, I can do all this stuff. And
and I'll even say one thing that I've oddly enough did was put LARPing on resumes, my job resumes, and I've gotten a couple questions of like, why is this relevant to this? And you look and go communication, soft skills, interpersonal skills, identifying problems, identifying strengths and weaknesses in others. Like it develops a lot of skills that people don't realize, and those soft skills that kind of come about. So like I said, it's very interesting and very fun to look at LARP in a deeper level rather than, as White was saying, just escapism. I think it starts as escapism, and then it starts to grow into not just character development, but like development of character.
LARP doesn't have to be one thing to everyone, you know, like we all come for different reasons. When I moved to LA and I was looking for a game, main reason is I was trying to meet friends. Like, it wasn't for an escape, it wasn't for anything, it was just I was trying to meet people. When I was LARPing in high school, you know, I would say that the confidence boost was probably the biggest benefit for me. And yeah, maybe that was a little bit more of the escapism element. And now, hell, like, I like the sport aspect too. Like, that's a reason to try to stay in shape, you know?
Yeah, we go through stints where we don't LARP, and then we're kind of feeling like out of season. Got to get back into shape for LARP season coming up. So do you have any final thoughts, any final words for our listeners? I really excited to see maybe a follow-up episode with you at some point as how you feel like your game has advanced. You guys are, again, I know you're coming up on a event soon, correct?
Yeah, we should have a game in 2 weeks. And we have a holiday party on Saturday, and I'm looking forward to seeing people. So that's where I'm at. I
definitely understand that. So I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to meet with us and talk with us, John. And if you have any places where you want people to check you out or check your LARP out, please leave a word here and we'll make sure that they know.
Sure. Yeah. So our website is www.TwinMask.com. And again, that's mask singular, not masks. And we also have some, the videos are on our website as well, but you know, we have some cool stuff on YouTube too. So check it out.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, sir. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
And once again, everyone, thanks for joining us at Grey Muzzle Geekery Podcast.
And as always, we are all geeks. To be otherwise may very well mean to live without passion. Good night.
Nah. Thank you for listening to another episode of Grey Muzzle Geekery with Dusty Red and Dusty White.
You can support our continued geekery at our Patreon website, patreon.com/greymuzzlegeekery. Be sure to check back often as we start to add geek cred levels.
You can send your questions and comments to us at greymuzzlegeekery@gmail.com or find us on Twitter at greymuzzlegeek.
We can be found on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and Buzzsprout.
And a special thank you to Pepper Coyote for our intro theme. And if you like what you heard, you can find more of his stuff on Spotify, Patreon, or directly from his Bandcamp page.